Hello. Well, today I'll be talking about Conan the strategy board game. I don't remember what year this came out. I've had it for a long time, but I've only played it with other players twice, the last time in 2017. It does have an expansion, which I own, but I'm only going to be going over the base game, not including the expansion. In fact, I haven't yet played it with that expansion because I got it after the last time I played this game in 2017. Anyway, let's get started with how to set up. As usual, first thing you'll do is place the game board in the middle of the play area amongst all the players. First thing to happen is each player will decide which kingdom they want to play. You have Hyperborea, Aquilonia, Turin, and Stygia. I'm going to be playing a 3-player game, or setting up for a 3-player game, and the rules suggest in a 3-player game playing Aquilonia, Stygia, and Turin. So Hyperborea will not be one of the kingdoms used in this explanation. But the rules that I'm going to explain should all be pretty much the same. And I'll mention when they're not. But again, we're just going through setup at this point. After players have decided which kingdom they're going to play, they take their corresponding kingdom cards. This is the deck for Aquilonia, but they have a different back for each kingdom. This is Stygia, and these are the kingdom cards for Turin. The players will take their bidding tokens. They match the color of the figures for that kingdom. So the figures for Aquilonia are kind of a whatever this is, orangish kind of. Anyway, the players will take the bidding tokens, their plastic figures, their empire points marker. Each player then gets 3 gold. The Stygia player also receives 2 sorcery tokens, and if the Hyperborea faction or kingdom is in play, they would also receive 2 sorcery tokens, but I'm setting up, again, as I said, a 3-player game, and Hyperborea is not included, so only Stygia will receive the 2 sorcery tokens. Players will then place their starting army tokens or army figures on the board. The Aquilonia kingdom receives 5 figures, and they go in his home kingdom. And 4 emissary figures that also, the emissaries look like they're riding a horse. For this kingdom anyway, and they go in their home kingdom. The Turin or Turan player also gets the same 5 army unit figures and 4 emissary figures in his home kingdom. The Stygia player only starts with 4 army unit figures and also 4 emissaries. He kind of looks like he's on camel or something. And if the Hyperborea player were in play, he would also get 4 army unit figures and 4 emissaries. Players will take their kingdom deck, shuffle it, and place it face down in their play area. And so, as you can see, I've done that here for the Stygian player, shuffled his kingdom deck, and for the Turin or Turan player, and shuffled their kingdom deck, and put it in their play area with their figures, bidding tokens, gold, and sorcery tokens if they have any. You then take the objective deck, which has this back, shuffle it, and draw as many cards as there are players, so in this case 3-player game, and place them up here face up, 1 face up for each number of players, so in this case a total of 3. You then shuffle the strategy deck and place it on the board. Each player will then draw 2 strategy cards and 2 kingdom cards into their hand. Of course, you don't reveal these to other players, and this will form their starting hand. You take the Conan figure and place it in Sumeria on the game board. I really got to get that painted as it doesn't look too good, just gray. Next you take the adventure deck, which has this back, shuffle it, and then draw 4 cards. And place them here on the adventure deck space. That forms the 4 cards for the first age. The game is played over 3 ages. You then reveal the top card of the adventure deck that you just placed there and place it in the current adventure space. And you'll place the Conan destination marker here where it shows, so that will be in Turin. And then there's just a little flavor text here for this adventure. Conan faces the dark magic of an ancient artifact. So we take the Conan destination marker, which looks like this, and again put it where it said, so that is here in Turin. You take the adventure tokens, which look like this, and place them in an opaque container of some sort. I place them in this bag. Shake them up, and then you'll look here at the top, or the current adventure card, and you'll draw out the number you've seen here and put them here on the adventure track. So we'll need to draw 5. And you put them face up. So 5 for this adventure. Then in a 4-player game, you would take the 3 treasure cards, the Cobra Crown, the Sword of Atlantis, and the Heart of Tammuz, along with the bonus card, flip them over, shuffle them up, and each player would randomly draw 1 that they would have to start the game with. In a 3-player game, you do not include the Conan bonus card, so nobody will start that with that in a 3-player game. So you shuffle up the remaining treasures, 3 treasures, and each player will draw 1 randomly. So we'll just say this player gets this one, the Cobra Crown. Stygia will get the Heart of Tammuz, and Turin will get the Sword of Atlantis. And they each have a different little power, which won't mean much to you now, but we'll talk more about them later when we get into the rules. Next, players will bid to see who controls Conan first. So the first thing that happens when you're bidding for Conan is each player draws 1 strategy card into their hand. Again, remember, these hands of cards are normally kept secret from the other players, but since I'm playing solo, I just leave them face up. Then, each player will look at his strategy cards and choose 1 to use in his bidding for Conan. These strategy cards have multiple uses, but in the bidding for Conan, you're looking at this value here. So this one would be worth 4, this one with 1, and this one with 1. So each player will decide which one of their strategy cards they want to use in their bid and place it face down in front of them. And they'll also choose one of their bidding tokens to put face down on top of the card that they want to use for the bid, and that will be their total bid. So for instance, this player will be bidding a total of 8. So each player places their strategy card they're using for their bid and their bidding token face down. So we'll show the Stygian player has done the same and the Turin player has done the same. Then everybody reveals. So the Turin player played a 6 and his 4 bidding tokens, so a total of 10. Stygian player played a 5 and a 5 for a total of 10. And The Aquilonia player played a 4 and a 4 for a total of 8, so he's out. So between these two players who tied, the control of Conan would normally go to the player who has the fewest amount of adventure tokens, but at the beginning of the game nobody has any adventure tokens, so we have to go to the next tiebreaker. And the next tiebreaker is whose kingdom is currently closest to the Conan figure. So the Turin's player's kingdom is just 1, 2, 3, 4 from the Conan figure, and the Stygia is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the Turin player would win this bid, and he would get the control of Conan, so he takes the Conan player card that says you control Conan, and he puts that in his play area. The strategy cards that the players used to bid for Conan, all players, then get discarded into the strategy card discard pile. And the bidding tokens they use are set aside and not usable in future bids. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So I just turn them over, meaning they're not usable. Now, in future bids, you can use the tokens that are available to you. If you ever use your 3 to bid, you always get that back. So you never have to turn that over and make it unavailable to you. You can always have your 3. And in the future, if you ever bid with your 0, you can retrieve all tokens that you've previously bid with back into your available bidding tokens, but then the 0 goes out of the game. It's never available again. So in the future, when you bid with tokens again, you'll never get those back a second time. Again, the only one you will always get back is your 3. And then at the end of the bidding for Conan to start the game, the player who won Conan takes the first player token, and he'll take the first turn of the game. The tokens for the sorcery tokens, Crom Count the Dead tokens, gold tokens, raider tokens, and dice should just be set aside somewhere within reach of all players. And that's it. Then we're set up and ready to play. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, the game is played over 3 ages of Conan. At the end of the 3rd age, the game ends. Or in the 3rd age, if someone crowns Conan as king. We'll talk about that later. But each age is made up of 4 adventures of Conan. And we started with the first adventure in the current adventure, and then the adventure tokens are on the adventure track. Once all 4 of the adventures that were initially dealt are complete, then that's the end of an age. Then you have an age change phase, and then you draw 4 new adventure cards and put them on the adventure deck and turn over the top one, and that starts the next adventure. Again, you'll do that through 4 adventures, have another age change phase to the 3rd age, and then deal 4 more adventure cards into the adventure deck, and go through those 4 and then end the game. Or it could end prior to that again if somebody crowns Conan as king, which we'll talk about as we go on with the rules. So each age, or each adventure, is broken up into a various number of player turns. The first turn, as we said, starts with the player who won control of Conan in the initial bid for Conan. And so they'll take their first turn. So the first thing that a player who controls Conan does on their turn is they have the opportunity to move Conan. So at the beginning of their turn, if they move Conan closer to his destination marker, which was determined by the current adventure, if they move him closer, then they take the leftmost adventure token from the track and put that in their play area. They put it face down. Now, the other players will have seen it because it was face up originally, but they're likely not going to remember all the tokens that you received. So anyway, they take that token and place it face down. Now, they do have the opportunity, instead of putting in their play area, they can discard that token for whatever is showed down here. So for this one, you could discard it for one sorcery token. This one you could discard for 2 gold, 1 sorcery token, 1 sorcery token, 1 sorcery token. But if you decide to keep it, instead of discarding it for that reward, you keep it face down in your play area, and you don't in the future have an opportunity to turn it in for that reward. You can only do that when you initially get it. So if you move Conan closer, then you can take the leftmost token off the adventure track and put that in your play area or exchange it for whatever its reward is. If you decide not to move Conan, or if you don't move him closer, you move him further from his destination area, then the leftmost token is still taken off the adventure track, but it's just discarded out of the game. So that's an extra opportunity, or an extra option that the Conan player has on his turn. After that, all the other players' turns, the Conan player and all the other players' turns are the same. So next, on your turn, if you have any play on the table cards in your hand, those come from your kingdom cards. If you have any, for instance, this one, play on the table, use after rolling the contest die during a military contest, re-roll up to 2 dice. So if you have a play on the table card, at the beginning of your turn, you can pay this amount of gold, so that would be 1 gold, and play that on the table in front of you. Then in the future, during that turn or another future turn, if you want to use that card, you do whatever it says, and then you turn it upside down to show that it's been used. And then you can't use it again unless at the beginning of one of your future turns you decide to pay that amount of gold again to refresh that card and turn it back up again. There's also an opportunity where those cards will get refreshed automatically at the end of an age. So again, that's one of the options you have at the beginning of your turn. You can play on the table card, or refresh a play on the table card that you've already played if you want to and have the money to. Next, you choose one of the fate dice and execute whatever action it allows you to execute. Now, the first turn of the game, there's no fate dice in the fate dice pool yet, so the first player on his first turn will roll the fate dice. I'm just going to roll them into this little dice tray. So he'll roll all the fate dice, put them in the fate dice pool as however they were rolled. And then when a player takes their turn, they choose one of the fate dice and take the actions that allow. So let's talk about each of the actions allowed by a fate dice. So one of the fate dice options is the Court and Conan result, which is this one. So if the player chooses this and he's the player that controls Conan, the first thing he can do before taking his court action is take a Conan action, where he can move Conan 1 space and or place a raider token on the board in the same space that Conan is located before or after he moved, or in an adjacent space. And this is a raider token. So for instance, if this player here, the first player, took a Court and Conan die He would be allowed to move Conan, um, and then he could place a raider token either in the same space as Conan or in any adjacent space. And we'll talk about what the raider tokens are later, but I just wanted to show what one option is for the court and Conan die. Now, if a player that's not controlling Conan takes the court and Conan die, he just takes the leftmost available adventure token into his play area, or he can take it and discard it for the reward on it, as we talked about earlier. But he would not get to move the Conan figure. So only the player that controls Conan gets to move the Conan figure. So if you're a player that doesn't control Conan, you take the court and Conan die, then you just take the leftmost token from the adventure track. Then next, for either type, either the player that controls Conan or one of the players that doesn't control Conan, they get to take the court action. So for the court action, you can draw one strategy card and one of your kingdom cards into your hand. There's no hand limit for the amount of cards you can have in your hand, either strategy or kingdom cards. So I just wanted to mention that. So again, one option for the court action is draw one strategy card and one fate card into your hand, or you can just draw two strategy cards into your hand, or if you have a kingdom card in your hand that says event, like this one, you can use your court action to play your kingdom card, one of your kingdom cards that says event. So for instance, this one would let you place 2 new army units in Turin. Then you can take a military action. We'll talk about military actions here in a minute. But anyway, I just wanted to mention what the court action allows you to do. So again, it's draw one strategy card and one kingdom card into your hand, or draw 2 strategy cards into your hand, or play one kingdom card that has the event word on it from your hand. Alright, if you take a die with this icon, that's a military action, and you can take a military action. So one thing you can do with a military action is move up to 2 of your armies into adjacent friendly provinces. Now at the beginning of the game, you don't have any adjacent friendly provinces, but if later in the game you had taken control of this province and this province, you could take 2 of your armies and move them into adjacent friendly provinces, because if they have your control marker in them, then they're friendly to you. So when it says armies, that includes these army units, not your emissaries, which ride animals. And when you move an army, these are a unit, not an army. So an army is any number of those units. So, but you can never have more than 5 army units in a province other than your home kingdom. You can always, there's no stacking limit in your home kingdom, but in any province outside of your home kingdom, you can't have more than 5 units. So, for instance, you could decide, all right, I'm going to make an army of these 2 guys and move them here into this friendly province, and make an army of these 3 guys and move them here into this adjacent friendly province. So that's one thing you can do with a military action, is move up to 2 armies into adjacent friendly provinces. And again, a friendly province is either all these provinces that don't have any control markers in them, those are neutral provinces. So if you end up conquering a neutral province, you can place a fort in it, which is what this is, and it will become a friendly province to you. You can also make alliances with neutral provinces, which we'll talk about later, in which case they'll have a tower, and that makes that province friendly to you also. And you can also turn a fort into a city by placing one of your towers on top of the fort, and that becomes a city, but it's still a friendly province to you. So another option you have, instead of moving two armies to adjacent friendly provinces, you can move one army from an adjacent friendly province, and then make an attack with an army into an enemy or neutral province. So, for instance, you could take this army from a friendly province into an adjacent friendly province, and then you could make a whole army out of these guys and make an attack into a neutral or enemy province. And when you move your army units into a neutral province or an enemy controlled province, then you're making an attack. Or if you didn't have a friendly army to move into an adjacent friendly space, you can still just make one attack with an army. So you could still just move this army into here and make an attack on this neutral province. And finally, with a military action, you can, from your reserve, place up to two units in two different friendly provinces. So I could put one here and here, since this is friendly to me. So those are your different options to use with a military die. And we'll see more about how that army movement works when we get into the example turns. Alright, another option you have is the intrigue result. So within an intrigue result, you can move up to two emissaries. And when moving emissaries, they can move into an adjacent province. If that province is neutral or an enemy province, they have to then stop. However, if it's a friendly province or a province containing another emissary, then they can move again. So, for instance, if I use this intrigue die, if I chose the intrigue die to take my action to move two emissaries, I can move this emissary here and then move my second emissary here, and because there's a friendly emissary in there, I could then move him again. Now, because that's not a friendly space or it doesn't contain a emissary, he'd have to stop. But for instance, if I had an emissary here and an emissary here, to move one emissary, I could move him here. Then because there's a friendly emissary there, I could move him here. And then because there's an emissary there, I could then move him again there. And then he would have to stop. So again, one of the options you have with the intrigue dice is to move up to two emissaries. Or you can move one emissary and then start an intrigue contest in a neutral or enemy province. And an intrigue contest, you're trying to make an alliance with that province. So either in a neutral province, you're trying to make alliance with it, where if you're successful, you then place a tower in there and it's friendly to you. So, for example, you could move a emissary into here, where an enemy is allied with this territory, and you could try to start an intrigue contest in there to remove his tower and make that province neutral again. Now, you can never start an intrigue contest where there's an enemy army or where there's an enemy fort or city, but if it just has a tower in there showing that it's allied with that province, you can move an emissary in there and try to do an intrigue contest to try to, again, make that province neutral again. And if it's a neutral province and you do an intrigue contest and you're successful, then you get to place your tower in there and it becomes allied with you. And we'll talk more about intrigue contests and military contests shortly. I'm just showing the different options you can do with dice on your turn. Another thing you could do, another option you have with the intrigue die, is move one of your emissaries into an enemy controlled province and then remove your emissary and collect the amount of gold depending on the province rating. So if you move this emissary in here, then you can remove that emissary and collect 4 gold into your stockpile. But again, you do have to remove your emissary, and you can only do that in an enemy-controlled territory. So either where they have a fort, a city, or a tower. Or the final option you have with an intrigue die is to take an emissary from your reserve and place it in any friendly province. Now again, at the beginning of the game, your only friendly province is your home kingdom. Enemy armies can never take over your home kingdom, never attack your home kingdom. Opponents' emissaries can move into your home kingdom, but they can't take any kind of action there. They can't try to do an intrigue contest or anything there. They could move through it or into it. But again, so the last thing you can do with an intrigue die is take one emissary from your reserve and put it in any friendly province. If you use a die with this result, you can either use it for a military action or an intrigue action, your choice. And if you use a die with this result, you can use it for any of the previous type of actions, either intrigue, military, or court action. Now, if you use it for a court action, you don't get the Conan part, so you don't get to, if you're the Conan player, you don't get to move Conan, and if you're a non-Conan player, you don't get to take a token. So you don't use the Conan part of the court and Conan action dice. If you use a wild, you only use the court part, which again was where you could draw 2 strategy cards, or a strategy and a kingdom card, or play an event card from your hand. Now, one thing about the wilds, you cannot spend them for an action if that action is available on another dice still in the fate dice pool. So you couldn't use this wild. You couldn't say, I'm going to use this wild to take a military action, because there's still dice available to take military actions. You couldn't use it to take a intrigue action, because there's a couple of dice available to do intrigue actions. So really it wouldn't do any good to take this wild right now, but later, if maybe these dice were gone and you wanted to take a military action, then you could take the wild, because there's not an available military action, and say, I'm going to take a military, or military action with this wild result. So those are the possible actions. So again, a player on their turn would take 1 dice from the fate pool, take it out of the fate pool, take whatever action is available on that dice. Then that will end their turn. Then it goes to the next player's turn in clockwise order, where they will choose a die. Now, every time a die is used, it's removed from the fate pool. So eventually, when a player takes a die out, the fate pool will be empty. The next player whose turn it is takes all the fate dice, rolls them, and replenishes the pool. So let's now talk about military and intrigue conquest. So say if you used this dice to do the military action, and you decided to make an army out of these guys and move them in here. Remember, the maximum you can have is 5. When you attack, so I'm taking a military action to attack this province, so I can move to an adjacent province and attack it. When it's a neutral province like this, not an enemy province, then you're starting what's called a campaign, and you put one of your soldiers or army units on the first step of this campaign track, and the pictures on this campaign track indicate different types of terrain that you're fighting in. So the first battle in the campaign track takes place here in the hills, then in plains, and then in urban areas. So anyway, you put one of your army units on the first step of the campaign track, and then you get to make a military contest roll. So when you're doing a military contest roll like this, you get a number of dice equal to the number of units you have in there. So in this case, 5 combat dice. When you are making the attack, you're the attacker. Now, the defender is this province, so it will get to roll a number of defense dice equal to its province rating, which is 4 here. So when it rolls for defense, it will roll 4 dice. But because I have 5 units in here, I get to roll 5 attack dice. Now, you also get the opportunity to play one of your strategy cards, and that's where this terrain comes into play. So right now, the combat is in the hills. So if I look at my strategy cards, you look at this bottom line here, and if you have one that has the hills icon that's not grayed out, then you could play that card. Now, for this guy does not. But here's an example of one that does. So if he was making this attack, since it's in the hills according to the campaign track, he could play this strategy card because it's got the hills icon on it. And then that means that shields and axes rolled on the attack dice, axes and shields would count as hits for him. Now if you didn't play this card, then shields and axes don't normally count as hits. So normally, let's go through all the different possibilities. Normally this is a hit for the attacker or the defender. That's nothing unless you've played a card that allows shields to be hits for you. That's a blank, obviously nothing. This is a hit for the attacker and the defender, but if the attacker has Conan in the battle, and Conan is in the if he's the player that controls Conan and he has Conan in the province where the contest is taking place, then he gets 1 extra hit for Conan. This die result is a hit for the attacker only, not for the defender, and I think that covers all of them. So the attacker would roll his die first, and this, unless he played a strategy card that had axes on it, like that one we showed, then this would not be a hit. This would be 1 hit. This would be 1 hit. He's not the Conan player, and he doesn't have Conan in there, so it just counts as 1 hit. Again, the sword only counts if you're the Conan player that controls Conan and you have Conan in the province where the battle takes place. And neither one of these are hits because he didn't play a card. So 2 hits. Then the defender would roll dice, so he gets to roll 4 dice. And he gets, remember, this is a hit for both attacker and defender. This is 1 hit for both attacker and defender again, if Conan is in there. This is neither shields and axes don't count for a hit in this case for the defender, which is the neutral province. So he got 2 hits. The attacker got 2 hits, and ties go to the defender. So in this case, the attacker would lose. When you lose a contest in a campaign like this, you then have to remove one of your army units back to the supply. If the attacker won the roll, then he would not lose a unit, and he would get to move his army unit to the next space on the track. And Then he could wait until another turn, until he has another turn to take another military action, or you can do it what's called a forced march by removing one of your units there and then having another contest where you get to roll again. But again, every time you lose, um, since he lost, like in my example, he would have to remove a unit. Then you still have the opportunity where you could do a forced march and remove a unit, but of course now you're only rolling 3 dice to the 4 of the neutral province. Now, whenever you're playing with other players, the player to the player to the left of the attacking player rolls the dice for the neutral province, but he doesn't get to play strategy cards or anything like that for the neutral province. He just rolls the 4 dice. In the case of this neutral province would only roll 3 dice, and so forth. If the attacker ever does manage to win a contest when he's on the last icon, then he can remove a unit and place a fort there. Then he now gets 4 empire points, so he would take his empire point token and move it up on the track. And so the more empire points you get, you move your... but anyway, you get a number of empire points depending on the rating of the province that you took over. And again, you get to place a fort in it if you took it over, and then that province is now friendly to you. Earlier we had talked about on the player that controls Conan, if he takes a Court and Conan die, he can move Conan and place a Raider token. So if a Raider token is in a neutral province where you're having a battle, the player rolling for the defense of the neutral territory, even though they can't play a strategy card, if there is a Raider token in there, then any axe results on the dice count as a hit for the neutral territory. You'll most of the time never roll more than 5 dice. There are some cards or other options that may let you roll a 6th dice. You can never roll more than 6 dice, period. Alright, so that's a campaign. Another type of military contest you might have is if you decide to use a military die to make an attack against an enemy-controlled province. So say you move your enemies in there, or your army in there, to make attack against an enemy-controlled province. Again, you'll roll a number of dice equal to the number of units you move in there. The terrain that's being fought on will always be the first icon. You don't need to put a man on there because you won't fight on a track. You'll just always use the first terrain icon to determine what the terrain that the battle is taking place on in order to play your strategy cards. And this is called a siege contest when you're attacking an enemy-controlled territory. So in this case, if this guy was attacking, he would roll 5 dice. Now, the defender in a siege rolls a number of dice, either equal to the number of units that he has, army units that he has in that province, or the province rating, whichever is higher. So in this case, he's only got 1 army unit, so the province rating is higher, so that's what he would roll. So he would roll 4 defense dice. If he had 5 army units in here, then he would roll 5 defense dice, because then his number of units would be higher than the province rating. So the attacker would roll 5, the defender would roll 4. They could play a strategy card if they have one that has hills on it. If the attacker wins, then the defender has to remove one of his army units. If the attacker loses, then he has to remove one of his army units. If the attacker, if there is no army unit to remove for the defender and the attacker wins, then the defender has to remove his control marker, in which case the province goes back to being neutral. Now, unlike when you're doing a campaign against a neutral territory where you get to attack once, and then whether the attacker wins or loses, he can't attack again until he waits till a future turn when he uses a military action or does a forced march by removing one of his units. That's different in a siege. In a siege, if they had a battle and say the defender won the roll and the attacker had to remove a unit, then the attacker would decide if he wants to attack again or if he wants to retreat back to where he came from. If he decides to attack again, they would roll again here. This time the attacker would only roll 4 dice, and the defender would still get to roll 4 as the province rating is higher than his number of units. So each time after the roll, the attacker decides if he wants to continue or if he wants to retreat back to where he moved his units in from. So if the defender ended up losing this unit, maybe on the next roll, then the next roll, maybe the attacker loses his unit, and then maybe he decides, all right, I'm going to retreat. I'm not going to try anymore. Because even if there's no army units in here, the defender still gets to roll the province rating until he loses and his control marker is removed. And the defender can never retreat from a siege. So unless the attacker decides to retreat, the defender just has to continue fighting until either the attacker wins or the defender or the attacker retreats. So as I said, if the attacker ended up winning and the defender had to remove his control piece, the province goes back to being neutral. The attacker would then place one of his units on the first step of the campaign track, and then in future turns he could attack doing a campaign, as we talked about earlier, to try to take over this neutral province. Or if all units in the attacking army were defeated, then the defender would just remain in control of the province. If the attacker does win and has to start a campaign in a neutral province, he still, for defeating the enemy there, he gets to take 1 Crom Count the Dead token and put that in his play area, and those are used for bonus scoring at the end. If the defender caused the attacker to retreat or the attacker to lose all of his units, then he would instead get the Crom Count the Dead token. Alright, let's talk about the last type of military contest you can have, and that's called a battle. So, if for instance the Stygian army was here doing a campaign against this neutral province and his figure is on the second space of the track, and the Aquilonian army here decides he wants to attack this Stygian army, so he uses a military die, maybe moves these guys in here. So making an attack, you can move to an adjacent province and make an attack. So now he's initiating, this is called a battle. And it works the same as the other military contest. The number of dice the attacker would roll, which is the guy that moved in there to start the battle, is the attacker. So he would roll 4 dice. The defending player would roll depending on the number of units he has, so he would roll 3 dice. And the terrain that's used for if either side wants to play strategy cards, the terrain is whatever space that the player that was doing the campaign in that province, whatever space his unit is on the track. So in this case it would be forests that would be the terrain that could be used when players play strategy cards. And so, again, the attacker would roll, defender would roll. Yeah, whichever side loses has to remove a unit. Then the attacker decides he wants to continue or if he wants to retreat. If he retreats, he has to retreat back to where he came from. If the attacker decides he wants to continue, then the defender can decide if he wants to retreat. If he wants to retreat, he has to be able to retreat to an adjacent friendly province. If there isn't one, then he can't retreat. So if after the first roll, maybe the attacker lost and he uses one guy and either guy says he's going to retreat, so then they would roll again. This time the attacker would only get to roll 3 and the defender would get to roll for 3. And so it continues until either one side retreats or one side loses all their units. If the attacker wins and all the defending armies are defeated, then the attacker puts one of his remaining army figures on the first space of the campaign track, and then in future turns he can start a campaign against that neutral province. If the defender causes the attacker to retreat or eliminates all his units that were attacking, then he just remains where he is on the campaign track and can continue that campaign against that neutral province on a future turn with a military action. And then whichever side wins, either from causing the other side to retreat or lose all its units, that side will get 1 Crom Count the Dead. Well, that's a 3. They'll get a single Crom Count the Dead token. So let's talk about intrigue contests. So you remember we said one of the things you could do with an intrigue result, which you could use this side for, or is you could move 1 friendly emissary and then start an intrigue contest. So say he decides he's going to do that. Say this is the position he's in. He decides he's going to do that. So he moves 1 friendly emissary. So he moves here, and remember, if you move to where there's already an emissary or a friendly province, you can continue to move. So then he moves there. And then he decides he's going to start an intrigue contest where he has a friendly emissary. You have to have a friendly emissary where you're going to do an intrigue contest. And you can, or I should say, you can't do an intrigue contest in a savage province, which is a province that has like these skull and crossbones. Those are called savage provinces. So you can't ally with those provinces, so you can't do an intrigue contest there. You can't do an intrigue contest where a player has an enemy fort or city, or where an enemy has an army. So if the enemy has an army, a fort or city, or in a savage province, you cannot do an intrigue contest there. You could do an intrigue contest where an enemy just has a lone tower, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. Let's start first about doing an intrigue contest in a neutral territory. So we'll say that guy moved that emissary there, and then he wants to start an intrigue contest here in southern Shem. You can do that because you have an emissary there. So the number of dice that the person trying to do the intrigue contest gets to roll is 1 plus 1 for each adjacent emissary or each adjacent friendly territory. So in this case, he has 1 adjacent friendly territory, his home kingdom, and he has 1 adjacent friendly emissary, so that's 2 plus 1. So 1 plus each friendly adjacent friendly territory or emissary. Now, if you had another emissary in here or another emissary in here, that's not going to add to the total. If this guy was here, it would add to the total because then you would have 2 adjacent emissaries and 1 adjacent friendly territory. But this guy was here. So anyway, he gets 1 plus 1 for this adjacent emissary and plus 1 for this adjacent friendly territory, so a total of 3 dice. You can also use a strategy card similar to when you're doing a battle. Instead of looking at this line for a terrain type, you look at the central portion. You can see it's got the cup like on the intrigue dice to show that this portion is for intrigue. And you can play this card if the intrigue contest is taking place in this area in a 2 to 3 player game, or this area in a 2 to 4 player game. So in a 3 player game, it could be in either one of these areas. If you were playing a 4 player game, you couldn't use it in this area where he's doing his contest. But since I'm doing a 3 player game, he can use this card. And then it works similarly. He could play this card because it's in a valid area, and then any shield results would also count as hits. So he would roll his three dice, and since he's the attacker, he just gets 1 hit. Now the defender in the neutral territory gets to roll the province value, so he gets 3 dice also, and he got 2 hits, so the intrigue contest was not successful. Now when you're doing an intrigue contest against a neutral territory, if you're not successful, nothing happens. You don't lose your guy. It just stays there, and then in another future turn you could try another intrigue contest if you wanted to. If he had been successful, however, then he would remove his emissary, and he would get to place a tower there, meaning he's made an alliance with that province, and now that province is friendly to him, and he also gets to take an amount of gold equal to the province value, so he would get to take 3 gold as well. So now this would be a friendly territory to him. So in placing troops or whatever, moving to a friendly province, this province would now be friendly to him. But again, you do remove your emissary and replace it with a tower. If you are trying to remove the tower, break the alliance of one of your enemies by doing an intrigue contest where an enemy has a tower, it works the same. You get to roll a number of dice, 1 plus 1 for each adjacent friendly territory or friendly emissary. So in this case, again, he would get to roll 1, 2, 3. The enemy territory, if it gets to roll its province rating plus 1, so it would get to roll 4 dice. And again, both sides then are allowed to play strategy cards if they have one that meets the criteria. When you're doing it against a neutral province and the other, the person to your left is rolling for them, they can't play a strategy card for them. But when you're doing it against an enemy province that's got a tower, both sides can play a strategy card. And if the attacker trying to remove the tower wins, then the tower is removed and he gets to leave his emissary there. If the defender wins, then the attacker must remove his emissary and put it back in his reserve. So that pretty much covers both military contests and intrigue contests. So let's talk about the adventure track and how you move from the current adventure to the next adventure. So we mentioned every turn that the Conan player gets to move Conan. If he moves him 1 step closer to the Conan's destination, he gets to take the token and either keep it or change it, turn it in for his reward. If he uses a Crown and Conan dice, he gets to, if the non-Conan player uses a Crown and Conan dice, he gets to take a token and put it in his play area or trade it in for his reward. And so as the players take turns, eventually all these tokens will end up being removed from the track. At the end of the player's turn, when the last token is removed from the adventure track, that ends that adventure. And the treasure tokens, just talk a little bit about them, come in three varieties. This is the monster token, which represents monsters that Conan has fought and killed during his adventures. This one is treasure. It represents treasure that Conan has stolen during his adventures. And this one represents women, and that represents women who fell in love with Conan during his adventures. And as I mentioned, when you get tokens, if you don't turn them in for your reward, you keep them face down in front of you. You can always look at them at any time, but you don't want other players to know how many of each token you have, so you keep those face down in front of you. So at the end of the player's turn, after the last token is removed from the track, if Conan has reached his destination, then the player who controls Conan gets to take one random uh, adventure token from the bag and either keep it in his play area or turn it in for his reward. If Conan has not made it to his destination, he is then immediately moved to that destination, but the player controlling Conan does not get to draw a token from the container, the adventure token container. In either the case, then, the current adventure is discarded out of the game. The next adventure from the adventure deck is drawn. And again, it shows you where you need to move the destination marker, which now is Ophir, which is over here. And again, that says it there. Then there's again a little flavor text. Conan heads for Ophir to ransom a magic ring for a room full of gold. And then it shows you how many new adventure tokens to draw and place on the adventure track. So you would do that, draw 4 new tokens, put them on the adventure track, and then you have a new bid for Conan. So again, everybody would draw 1 strategy card, play 1 strategy card and 1 of their tokens. Everybody then reveal, and whoever has the higher value, they then control Conan for the next adventure. So when the last, you remember we started the game, there were 4 cards in the adventure deck. When the last card in the adventure deck is discarded, then that starts an age change phase from the first age to the second age, or from the second age to the third age. So the first thing you do in the age change phase is deal with raider tokens. You remember the person that controlled Conan, when he used a Court and Conan die to move Conan, he could place raider tokens on the board. So any player who has a raider token in one of their friendly areas either has to remove a soldier or an army unit to get rid of that token, or if they can't do that or don't want to do that, they then lose 1 of their empire points. So in this case, this guy, he could remove this unit, and that would remove all, if there was 2 tokens in there, 3 tokens, when you remove a unit, it removes all raider tokens in that province. Here he doesn't have an army unit to remove, so he has to lose a number of empire points equal to the number of raider tokens that he still has in friendly provinces, and then subtract that on the empire track. So here he has 1 raider token, so he would have to lose 1 empire point, and then that raider token is dismissed or taken away. This guy, for example, he also has a raider token here and no unit there to remove to eliminate it, so he would also have to lose 1 empire point. Now if you had multiple raider tokens across your friendly provinces that you're not able to remove because you didn't have army units to eliminate to get rid of those tokens, or you just didn't want to, then you have to lose 1 empire point for each raider token still in your friendly provinces. Then the raider tokens are removed. Any raider tokens that are in neutral provinces, those are just picked up and removed with no consequence. Next, each kingdom will receive gold, so each player will receive 5 gold plus 2 for every tower or city that they have. Now, this is a fort. You can later make it a city, and as I said, when you make it a city, you put a tower on top of it. It kind of snaps on there a little better. I'm just putting it as an example. But if you have a city, you get 2 gold for every one of those, and a tower, you get 2 gold for every one of those, and then you just get 5 gold for being a kingdom, I guess. Then if any players have completed an objective, you remember we started with these objective cards up here, they will get empire points, depending on how many. These each count as one. Some may be more than one, but for instance, this one, if you accomplish this objective, if you have a greater total of towers plus cities than any other player. So if a player completes that objective, they would get 1 empire point, and then this objective card is discarded. If nobody completes an objective, it just stays there for the next age. So you would look at each objective. If one player did manage to complete it, let's see what this one is. You accomplish this objective if you possess more sorcery tokens than any other player. So again, if somebody completes it, they would get 1 empire point, and then it would be discarded, and a new objective card would be drawn from the deck and replace it for the next age. And again, if nobody completed it, it just stays on there for the next age. Next thing you can do is build cities or raise troops. So you can place a troop in each friendly province you have, or when I say a troop, I mean an army unit. You could place an army unit in each friendly province you have that has either a city or a fort. So he would be able to place somebody there, and he would be able to place somebody there. Or you have the option, instead of placing an army unit where those forts are, you can upgrade them to cities. So instead of placing an army unit there, I could decide I'm going to upgrade that to a city, put a tower control marker. Again, those really snap on there better, like that, and upgrade that to a city. And this guy, instead of placing an army unit here, he could decide to upgrade that to a city. So it's your choice. Either get an army unit where you have a fort, or upgrade your fort to a city. And again, you can upgrade a fort to a city, but you can't upgrade a tower to a city. So you couldn't, you don't get to place army units where you have a tower, and you don't get to upgrade a tower to a city. Next, players get to spend gold. So for 2 gold, they can buy an army unit and place it in any friendly province. For 2 gold, they can buy an emissary and place it in any friendly province. For 2 gold, they can draw 1 strategy card and 1 kingdom card and add that to their hand. Or for 1 gold, they can just buy 1 strategy card. And so you can spend as much gold as you want to do that as many times, buy as many army units or emissaries or cards as you want. But remember, when you're buying army units and placing them in friendly provinces, you can never have more than 5 army units in a province other than your home kingdom. Next, you'll compete for the treasures. Remember, at the beginning of the game, each player was given 1 treasure, randomly drew 1 treasure. Now at the end of the age, everyone will turn their treasures in. Let's just look at these. The Cobra Crown lets you roll 1 additional die up to a total of 6 in all intrigue contests in which you're involved, and you gain 1 additional gold token when your emissaries collect gold. So that's what that treasure does. The Sword of Atlantis, when you are involved in a military contest, you always win the contest if you have the same number of successes as your opponent, unless you have no successes. So remember, normally in a contest, ties go to the defender, but if you have this card, you win all ties. And finally, the Heart of Tammuz. The cost for playing and refreshing any play on the table card is reduced by 1 gold to a minimum of 1. So anyway, in the age change phase, everyone has to turn in their treasure cards that they got at the beginning of the game, and then you compete to gain which one you want. So this is one point where your treasure tokens are involved. So each type of treasure corresponds to, or each type of your adventure tokens corresponds to one type of treasure. So the Crown of Cobra corresponds to treasure adventure tokens. The Sword of Atlantis corresponds to monster adventure tokens, and the Heart of Tammuz corresponds to women adventure tokens. So you're going to pick which one of those treasures you want and which one you think you can win, because you're going to decide, like, so this guy, he's got the most in monsters, so he's going to try to go for Sword of Atlantis. So you secretly choose tokens in one category, either monsters, treasures, or women, depending on what treasure you're going for and what you think you're going to have the most of in adventure tokens. So this guy, he's got the most in nothing really, but he wants to go for the Cobra Crown, so he's going to put forth he's going to use his one treasure token he's accumulated for that. And this guy, he doesn't really, so maybe he's going to try to go for the, later in the game, as the game goes on, you collect more and more treasure tokens, hopefully, if you've been Conan or you've used Crown and Court die to collect, I keep saying treasure token, adventure token. But anyway, then once everybody decides one category of adventure tokens they're going to use, they reveal them. And of course, this guy's going to you can use as many as you have. You don't have to use all that you have in one category. You can use as many as you want to, but remember, you'll be revealing that you're not going to lose them. You get them back, but you'll be revealing to the other players, kind of what you've got in that category. So he played for monsters. The other players didn't play monsters, so obviously he won that one. So he would get the Sword of Atlantis, and then he takes his monster tokens back. These guys both went for treasure for the Cobra Crown, but he played a higher total of 3 against 2. Again, if they had more treasure tokens, they could have played those. So you add up the total value of tokens you played. Again, they each just had 1, so he played a 2 against a 3, so this guy wins it. So he would get the treasure card, the Cobra Crown, and he gets his token. He won nothing, so he just gets his token back. And then the Heart of Tammuz, nobody won, so it's just not going to be in play for this next age. Then finally, the player who has after the bidding for the treasures, the player who has the lowest amount of empire points, which in this case right now is the Stygia player because he doesn't have any. The player with the lowest amount of empire points is awarded the Conan bonus card, and that card lets you, when you're bidding for Conan, during the bid for Conan, you may play a second strategy card after other players have played theirs, or after all players have revealed theirs. The second card substitutes the first card you used in the bid. Both cards you played are discarded after the bid. So it basically gives you a chance to play your higher strategy card after everybody's revealed their strategy cards in the bid for Conan. So again, that after the bid for the treasures, that goes to the player who has the fewest empire points. After that, you create a new adventure deck by drawing 4 new adventure cards, putting it on your adventure deck space, revealing the first one. You'd put out draw 4 adventure tokens, and put the Conan destination in Nordheim. And so you've got your adventures for your second age ready. And finally, you can refresh any play on the table cards that you've played at no cost. Normally at the beginning of your turn you can pay a cost to refresh or play on the table card. At the end of an age, you can refresh all your play on the table cards for no cost. Then before starting the next turn, everybody would bid for Conan again, just like we've shown in the past, and then you'd start the next round. And whenever the game is paused, a player, like say a player took the last adventure token, and then you pause to set up the next adventure and have a bid for Conan. So whenever the game is paused because of an adventure that you've completed an adventure, or you're doing an age change phase, the player whose turn would have been next, they take the first player token just to remind that they would be the next player. So no turn is skipped. It's just whenever you pause the game for age change or to reset a new adventure and bid for Conan, the player whose turn would have been next takes the first player token to remind that they would take the next turn. And so that's how you play. You continue playing through a second age, and then you have an end of age change at the end of the second age. Then you start the third age. So the game will end either when the last adventure is completed in the third age, or during the third age, the player who controls Conan can attempt to crown Conan as king of their kingdom. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll win, but it gives them some bonuses, which we'll talk about. But let me tell you how they can attempt to crown Conan as their king. So at the end of a turn, when an adventure is completed in the third age, so say the last token is taken, this adventure is completed. At the end of a turn when an adventure is completed, if the player who controls Conan has Conan in their home kingdom, they can attempt to crown him as king. So if that's the case, the player controlling Conan will say, before a next adventure card is drawn and set up, he'll say, I'm going to attempt to crown Conan as king, and show that he's got him in his home province. The Conan player will then announce one category of adventure tokens, either monsters, treasures, or women, and all players will then reveal all their adventure tokens in that category. If the category that the player trying to crown Conan announced, like say he said monsters, so everyone would reveal all the monster adventure tokens they have. If the player who announced he's trying to crown Conan has the most in that category, then he successfully crowns Conan as king, and he'll get the bonus scoring we'll talk about here in a minute. If he does not have the most, then he fails to crown Conan as king, and Conan lops off his head, and he is out of the game and does not get to continue. Either way, the game ends at that point, and you go to final scoring. But if the guy that got his head lopped off for not successfully crowning Conan, he doesn't get to count in the scoring at all. He's just out. Yeah, the game will end then, and the other players will go to final scoring, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, if no player attempts to crown Conan during the third age, the game just ends normally after the last adventure card is completed in the third age. Then you go to final scoring at that point. So the first thing in final scoring is to resolve raider tokens, as we discussed earlier. If you have raider tokens in your provinces, from your friendly provinces, you either have to remove a soldier to remove the token from that province, or for each token you can't remove from a friendly province, you have to lose 1 empire point. Each player then receives empire points for every province where he has a fort or a city, not towers. So in this case, this guy would get 4, 5, 6, 7, 11 empire points. So he would move his empire point marker up, the total of that. So you get where you have forts or cities, not where you have towers. So each player would add that to their total. Each player then receives an amount of gold equal to the total of where he has cities or towers. So this guy would get 4, 8, 11 gold. Players then check if they've completed any of the current objectives. If they have, they then get points for that and move their empire point marker up on the track for any objectives they completed. Players then total all their gold, and whichever player has the highest amount of gold receives an additional 3 empire points. If 2 or more players are tied for the highest amount of gold, then they each just get 1 additional empire point. Players then check who has the most Crom Count the Dead tokens. The player with the most gets 3 additional empire points. Again, if there's a tie for the most, then the players that tied just get 1 additional empire point each. If a player did successfully crown Conan, he gets 3 additional empire points. If nobody crowned Conan, then at that point everybody adds the total value they have in each category of adventure tokens, and whoever has the highest total in each category, monsters, treasure, or women, they get 5 additional empire points for the category they have the highest total in. If there's a tie for most total adventure token points in a category, the tied players get 2 points each. But if somebody did successfully crown Conan, the players still totaled their adventure tokens in each category, but only the Conan player, if he has the highest in a category, he still gets the additional 5 points. But if one of the other players has the highest in that category, they don't get the highest, or they don't get the 5 points. So only the Conan player, if he crowned Conan, only the player that crowned Conan can get the points for totals in adventure token categories, but he only gets them if he does have the highest. If he doesn't have the highest, he doesn't get the points, but neither do the other players. So that's a little bonus again for the player who crowns Conan. And that's it. Then the player with the highest total empire points wins the game. If there happens to be a tie for empire points, then the person who has the highest total number of adventure tokens, not the highest total of your adventure tokens, but the highest total number of adventure tokens that a player has, they would then win. And if that's a tie, then the game just ends in a tie. So that's a long explanation, but that's how the game's played. So why don't we reset up back to how we were at the beginning right after setup and go through a few example turns and then wrap it up. Alright, I think I've got everything set back up how it was at the beginning. I couldn't remember how the dice were, so I just re-rolled those. But this video is already really long, so I'm going to try to do a few, maybe 2 turns each really quick and wrap it up. So this player won control of Conan at the beginning, so he's going to be first player. So again, the first thing he does is at the beginning of his turn he can move Conan. If he moves him closer to his destination, then he gets to take the leftmost token. So that's what he is going to do. So he'll take this monster token and put it in his play area. Then next, if he wants to play any play on the table cards, which he does, he has one in his hand that he was dealt at the beginning of the game. This one, which you can use after rolling the contest dice during a military contest to re-roll up to 2 of your dice in a roll. So he's going to play that, and that costs him 1 gold. So he's going to pay 1 gold to play that on the table in front of him. You know, I just thought of this. I don't think I discussed what the sorcery tokens are for. But when you're doing a roll in a contest, you can discard a sorcery token to re-roll all the dice that you rolled. You can't just re-roll some of them, you have to re-roll all of them. And then you discard the sorcery token, and you can only do that once per contest roll. Anyway, I'd forgotten about that. I thought I'd better mention it. The other kingdom card he has in his hand is an event. Remember, that takes a court and Conan dice to play an event. So anyway, now he decides what's he going to do on his turn, so he has to choose a die. So he's going to take a court and Conan action, and remember, because he's the Conan player, when he takes a court and Conan action, he can move the Conan figure, and before or after he moves him, he can place a raider token in the space Conan's in, or an adjacent space. So he's going to place a raider token in Aquilonia, and then he's going to go ahead and move Conan here. Now he gets to take a court action. That was the Conan part of the court action. And for his court action, he's going to draw 1 strategy card and 1 kingdom card into his hand. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, so first thing on his turn, he could play any play on the table cards, but he doesn't have any in his hand. This is the Stygian player. He's also going to play a court and Conan dice. So the non-Conan player, he can't move Conan, but he can take the leftmost token from the track, and he thinks he could turn that in for 2 gold, but he's going to keep it in his play area. And then I think for his court action, he's going to play an event. He has 2. He has this one, which says you receive 2 sorcery tokens and draw 2 strategy cards. So he's going to play that. So he gets 2 sorcery tokens and 2 strategy cards into his hand. And then this kingdom card that he played just goes into the kingdom card discard pile, which he'll make right here. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, the beginning of the Aquilonia player's turn. He is also going to play a play at the table card into his play area, which allows him to use at the start of military contest. Your opponent rolls 1 less dice, and that costs him 2 gold to play that. So he's going to pay his 2 gold and play it. The other card, kind of kingdom card, I don't know if we talked about, was an instant, which you can just play it when it says. This one is play when you start a military contest and Conan is in the contested province, blah blah blah. Anyway, I don't think I had mentioned that type of kingdom card. So now he has to decide what he wants to do on his turn. So we'll say he's going to do an intrigue. So he'll take this military intrigue die and do an intrigue. So he can move. One of the things he can do is move 2 emissaries. So he's going to move 1 here and 1 here, and that will end his turn. Alright, so we're back to the turn player. He controls Conan, so at the beginning of the turn he decides if he wants to move Conan closer. Remember, if he doesn't move Conan closer, a token still gets taken off the track, but it just gets moved away. But he is going to move Conan closer to the destination, so he gets to take this token. He could change it in for a sorcery token, but he's going to keep it. And he has another play on the table card that he's going to want to play on the table that allows him, at the start of your turn, you may use a fate die result to take an intrigue action instead of taking the action shown on the die. So he's going to play that. That costs him 1 gold to play that on the table. So he plays that. Now remember, he can take those actions whenever he wants to in the future, and if he does, he just rotates them. It doesn't cost any money when he uses them, but then at the beginning of one of his future turns, if he wants to use it again, he has to pay that amount of gold to refresh it, or just wait till the end of an age and it'll refresh automatically. But anyway, that's what he's going to do there. Then he's going to use a court or a wild to play a court and Conan die. There's no court and Conan dies on there, so he's going to use a wild to play that. But when doing that with a wild, you ignore the Conan part, so he can't move Conan and put a raider token, but he can use the court part, and he's going to use that to play this event card that he has that lets him place 2 new army units in Turin and then take a military action. So he's going to play that. We'll just make this his discard pile. So he gets to put 2 new army units in Turin. Remember, that's the only place that can have more than 5 army units. And then he gets to take a military action as if he used a die. So, normally you could move 2 armies to friendly provinces, but he doesn't have any other friendly provinces. The other thing you can do is move 1 army to a friendly province and then make an attack. But you can just do part of that, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to make an attack. So he's going to move 5 army units, form an army of 5 army units, and move them down into this savage province of Gulistan. Puts 1 on the first track, and he starts a campaign there. And he does have a strategy card he can play. It has plains, and that's the first on the campaign track as a plains. So any shields or axes he rolls also count as a success or a hit. So because he's got 5 units in there, he's going to roll 5 dice. And he got 1, 2, 3, and that counts as a hit because of the card he played. So he got 4 hits. Or successes, whatever you want to call it. Now, the province can only roll 3 dice, so there's no way it could get as many as him, so he's just automatically successful. So now he moves on to the next piece of the track. Now, he could stop, or he could reduce his army by 1 and doing a forced march and go again, which that's what he's going to do. So he's going to reduce his army by 1. This card he played gets discarded. Now we're in an urban area, and he does have a strategy card for urban, so he's going to play that. So this time shields will count as hits. He only gets to roll 4 dice now because he's down to 4 units, but he gets 1, 2, 3 hits. So he gets 3. Now the province has a rating of 3, so it can go ahead and roll 3 because it doesn't have a chance of getting 3 hits. But it only gets... that was that. So it gets 1. That doesn't count for a defender, so he only gets 1. So this guy was successful again, so he gets to move on to the next terrain. So he could reduce by 1 again and go again. Well, let's say he's going to do that. He's going to reduce, do another force march. This time he only gets to roll 3 dice. He doesn't have hills. He doesn't have a strategy card with hills, so he doesn't get any... he'll only hit on regular hit icons, which, he only got 1. Alright, now we'll roll for the province, defense. Well, 2 of them bounced out. And he got none. This doesn't count for the tag. So this guy's successful. So he gets to replace this army unit with a fort, and he gets 3 empire points for taking that over. Alright, and that's going to end his turn. Now we go on to the Stygia player's turn. He's going to use this die for an intrigue die, and he's going to move 2 emissaries. He'll move 1 there and 1 there. And that's pretty much all he can do. He doesn't have a card that he wants to do anything with, so that's going to end his turn. Alright, back to the Aquilonian player. He's just got, he can do a military action, or he's got a wild. He's going to use the wild to do an intrigue. So this time, remember, one of the options you have for an intrigue, one, you can move 2 different emissaries, or you can move 1 emissary and start an intrigue contest. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to move one emissary here, and he's going to start an intrigue contest here. So if you recall, you get 1 plus 1 for each friendly emissary, so that's 2, 3, and for friendly kingdom, so that's another one. So he's going to 1, 2, 3. He gets to roll 4 dice. Now let's see if you have an appropriate strategy card. He does have this strategy card, which has the area 2 to 3 players, in which he's doing his intrigue contest. So that will allow him, he's going to play that, and allow him to hit on shields. Plus, he's got the Cobra Crown, which you roll 1 additional die up to 6 in all intrigue contests in which you are involved, and you gain 1 additional gold token when your emissaries collect gold. So he gets to roll an additional die. So he gets 4 dice plus 1, so he actually gets to roll 5 dice in this intrigue contest, and he'll hit also on shields. So 1, 2, 3. He got 3 successes. All right, now the province gets to roll 3 dice, and it got 1 success. So he's successful allying with that neutral province. So he gets to put a tower there and remove his emissary. He also then receives an amount of gold equal to that province's rating, so he receives 3 gold into his play area. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, we come back to the turn player. He controls Conan. He is going to move Conan. Now Conan's in the destination. But because he moved Conan, he gets to take this token, and he could, again, turn it in for a sorcery or keep it. He's just going to keep it. Now, I don't think I mentioned this in the rule overview, but if the person that controls Conan has Conan at his destination when his next turn comes around, he doesn't have to move Conan. He can leave him there, and he still gets to take a token. That's only if Conan is already at his destination. Alright, and really the only thing he has at his disposal is a military die. So he's got to take a military action. So he's going to move 1 army into a friendly adjacent province. So he's going to choose these 2 guys as an army and move into adjacent friendly province, and then he can make an attack. So for his attack, he's going to move these guys into this province and attack here. This emissary does not prevent him at all from making an attack. So he doesn't have a strategy. He's only got 1 strategy card. It does not have a plains. So he just gets to roll 4 dice, and the province will get to roll 2. So he's going to roll 4. He gets 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. There's no point for the province to even roll because it can't get 4 hits. So he's successful. He's going to reduce 1 and go again. This time he gets to roll 3 dice. And he got 2 hits. I think he's going to stick with that. He does have this card where he could turn it and re-roll up to 2 of his dice. But he's just going to stick what he has. And now it's the province's turn, and they just get 1 hit. So this guy's again successful, so he removes this troop or unit, puts another fort there, and he gets 2 more empire points. And now he's got another province friendly to him. Alright, Stygia's turn. There's no more dice left in the fate pool, so he's going to re-roll all those dice. And he puts them in the fate pool with what he got. And then, just so we can show the end of an adventure, he's going to go ahead and do a court in Conan. So, for the Conan, he gets to take the leftmost available token. So he'll take this one. He'll keep it. He's not going to change it in for a sorcery token. And now at the end of the turn, we'll have to change the adventure. But he still finishes his turn. So now he did Conan part. Now for the court part, he's going to draw one kingdom card into his hand and one strategy card. And that's going to end his turn. So now the next thing we do, because this player would be the next player to take his turn, we go ahead and move the first player token over to him to remind that he has the next turn. And so now we get rid of this adventure card because that was completed. Because Conan did make it to his destination, the Conan player gets to draw a random token from the bag. He drew this 2-point monster token. Again, if Conan didn't make it to his destination, he wouldn't get to draw that. We then reveal the next adventure and put the destination token in Gulistan, which is here. So Conan doesn't have far to move at all. And then we draw out 3 adventure tokens, so this next adventure will only have 3 tokens. Alright, so I've drawn and placed the tokens. And so again, this adventure is going to be shorter than the last one that had 5 tokens. This one's only going to take 3 tokens to be picked up before this adventure ends. So now we have a bid for Conan, so each player will draw a adventure card into their, a strategy card into their hand, and then they're going to bid. Remember, the tokens they used prior in the beginning of the game to bid, they can't use. So, alright, so they've all put out their strategy card and bid tokens. So we see this guy had a 3 and a 5 for a total of 8. This guy had a 5 and a 4 for a total of 9. And this guy had a 5 and a 4 for a total of 9. So again, they tied again. Now is Conan closer to the home province. Again, he's closer to the home province of Turin, so Turin will remain the Conan player. Now these tokens they use get turned over. They can't be used again until this player plays their until these players play their 0 to recover them, and then these cards they use to bid get discarded. And then we start a new turn with the Aquilonia player. So that's all I'm going to go. This video is already really super long, but you would go till you get through these 4 adventures and then have a change of age change phase, another set of 4 adventures, another age change phase, and then another set of 4 adventures, or somebody crowns Conan, which ends it at that point, and do the final scoring. But I think this should give you a good idea of how the game plays. I like this game quite a bit. Again, I haven't played it with anybody else for 5 years now. Just I don't get to play that often, and when I do, some other games just happen to come up. But I do want to throw the expansion in and see what all changes that makes the next time I play this. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.